Okay, now this is a sand riddle. It's a sifting screen for the sand. We've got our parting powder in the mold. We'll put this on and we'll dump, half a shovel or so full of sand. It depends on the pattern. You need to cover the pattern completely with riddled sand. Okay? So this pattern actually has some fairly tall detail on it, so it takes a little bit more sand. I'm actually using the screen with the larger holes through it because I need to put more sand on here than I would if it was a pattern with very short amount of detail. Gonna need a little bit more. Again, just enough to cover the pattern completely so you don't see any of it. Then you can just shovel the rest of the sand in. Okay, that's got it pretty well covered. So now I can just take a shovel and shovel a bunch more sand. You want to be careful as you put the sand into the mold. Don't let it scoot the sand sideways that you've already put in, because then it'll disturb your parting powder. Also, you need to make sure that you don't run out of sand. So if there's someone waiting to do their casting behind you, have them get sand out of the used sand cart, put it in the mullet, otherwise you'll run out of sand. And if that happens, everything grinds to a halt. Okay, I'm just going to kind of scoot the sand into the corners. Notice I've got it a little bit higher than the level of the top of the flask, just a little bit, but it's going to pack down. Okay, now we're going to do what's called jolting. You want to hold on to the snap latch levers, opposite corners, and just keep them from coming open. Lean over the mold slightly and put a little bit of downward pressure on it, and then you hit this right lever down here with your knee and let this flask float up and down in your arms. That will do what's kind of a pre-pack of the sand. And you can see the sand has settled down. You want it a ½ inch or so below the level of the top of the flask. Okay, this is the bottom board. Since the flask is tapered, there's a separate size top board and bottom board because of the size difference in the flask. Your board should have, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch gap all the way around. So set the board on there, kind of seat it in place. Now we're going to roll the whole thing over, and you want to be very careful that the board stays there. So what you also have to do when you roll it over is you have to hold the flask tightly to the pattern. You don't want them to come apart. So you push the whole flask all the way back. Then on the back side, I'm going to grab around the two flask halves and hold them against the pattern and put my other hand on the board. Just raise it up, holding everything together, scoot it back, and then roll it on around onto the board, and then scoot it back into the middle of the table again. Okay. Okay, now we just repeat the same process on the top side, on the cope side. Blow out a little bit. And then we'll take our parting powder, light film, light dusting, sand riddle, put a shovelful into the riddle. Now there's not much detail on this side, so I don't need to riddle as much sand. Again, just cover the surfaces of the pattern so that you can't see them. You can take your hand and kind of run the clods through the riddle. And we'll need a little bit more of the little risers in there on it. Light cover. And you'll find you're going to have some debris left in the riddle. Any aluminum can go in the aluminum bucket, and then any pieces of wood or hard clay balls or anything like that we'll just throw in the trash. Okay, now you're done with the riddle, so now we'll fill the flask up away with sand. And I like to keep an eye on when I'm putting the sand in there. If I see any pieces of wood or aluminum, pick them out. Otherwise, they just keep circulating the sand system. This side, I can fill a little fuller than the bottom. It doesn't quite have to be below, really. Basically, I want to end up with it approximately level to the top. Okay, now I'm going to jolt it again. So this would be jolting the second half. Same process. And I'm just kind of getting this leveled out a little bit, getting the sand all the way in the corners. Maybe I'll hit it a couple more. Then you put your top board on. Make sure that it's not hanging out past the edges of the wood, or it'll tear the board all up. Now we're going to swing the table around. The top, I call it the platen. And this is where we squeeze the mold. This is a jolt squeeze machine. You've seen the jolt, now here's the squeeze. On this machine, you push the lever on the right downward, and I go until it stops moving. About 5 seconds or so, then you raise it. Sometimes when you lower the lever, the machine will come up part way, and then it has a timer, it'll blow off, but it doesn't always work, so I actually like it when it just doesn't do that. Okay, now we'll take the top board off.